Hello. Hello, please. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. Yeah, tears, but they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. The official narrative and official version of events put forward by the prosecution suggests that Jack Wombs was laying in wait with 2 shotguns near the gate awaiting the Range Rover's arrival. Now you can see a picture in front of you here which shows the back of the Range Rover, and this is the area where Jack Wombs was supposedly waiting for the Range Rover which was carrying Tucker Tate and Rolfe to arrive. Now you may believe that it's quite possible that he was hiding in some nearby undergrowth or some bushes, but I'm here today to tell you my own personal opinion and why I feel that there's no actual credible evidence to suggest that anyone was waiting nearby. Now, as you can see here, this is the picture, as I've just said, from the back of the Range Rover, and this is where detectives found a patch of disturbed undergrowth. Now, if we look now at what that disturbed undergrowth actually looks like, you can see a picture here. So, not what you would call your typical, well-covered foliage or bush, just really a trodden down piece of undergrowth. But what is most interesting about this information is where it actually is in relation to the Range Rover itself. Take a look at this picture here and you will see exactly where this disturbed undergrowth was found. Now, Jack Wombs was a very large man, and there is no way that he could have been laying in wait at that exact point whilst the Range Rover travelled up the lane. Now, bearing in mind that Tucker Tate and Rolfe may have been in the company of someone that they knew that evening, but nevertheless, they would have still been vigilant when they're travelling down the lane. And unless their lights were turned off, which I have no reason to believe they were, there is no way that a gunman could be laying in wait in that exact spot. Because quite simply, the track of movement from the vehicle would have shone its headlights directly into that area. And obviously on top of that, there's not actually any coverage whatsoever for anyone to hide. Now, a lot of people may say that he was laying down, but even so, there is no way that he would be in that particular spot there where that disturbed undergrowth was found. Also bear in mind here, when you look at these bushes, they are extremely rough and tightly knitted together bushes. These aren't sort of trees or, green foliage bushes or hedges. This is a sort of a real prickly bush that there's no way that someone's going to bury themselves in a bush of that type. Now, you may say that he waited around the back of the bush potentially. But what counts against all of that is the fact that the snow around those areas on the side of the tracks is more than likely, in my opinion, the last snow to actually fall. And what counts against this theory of him hiding behind a bush of some type is there's no other disruption of any undergrowth, no disruption of any bushes mentioned, and most importantly, no footprints matching anyone or any footprints whatsoever found around the bushes, behind the bushes, off of the track in any direction whatsoever. So the fact that there is a massive lack of evidence here tells me that this gives the theory of a second vehicle there being present a lot more credence. I just don't see here in these pictures where Jack Wombs, a very, very large man, could have been hidden. Just imagine the Range Rover now travelling down the track close to 7 p.m. in the evening, completely pitch black with just the full beam lights of the Range Rover to guide its way. Where would you feel comfortable as a gunman holding 2 shotguns hiding? He can't bury himself in one of those bushes because there's a large potential for him to cut himself, scratch himself, leave some sort of fabric evidence or DNA evidence. But none of that was ever obtained by the inspectors or detectives who were investigating this case. Quite simply, there's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that there was anybody laying in wait for Tony, Pat and Craig. Now let's take a look at Darren Nichols' supposed official version of events, and let's see exactly where this takes us. He states after the murders occur that the following happens. There was some conversation in the car with Mr. Steele. He said Jack was very cold-hearted. I said why? He said first of all that when they stopped down the lane, a gate had been shut. So I got out of the Range Rover and I didn't know where Jack was. Then Jack leaned into the Range Rover and shot all three of them. So that tells me there that according to Darren Nichols, there was some conversation after the murders took place that the gate that they were approaching, as far as the killers knew, was supposed to be open. When Jack got there, obviously, the gate was locked. Now, can you imagine the confusion that would be running through your mind when you've been planning this for such a long time, supposedly, and you realise that you've made a massive oversight? When the vehicle gets down to the lane, the gate's locked. Now, where exactly is Jack going to hide? How is he going to know exactly where the Range Rover would be stopped? And where in this whole picture here is he exactly going to hide? He can't hide in front of the bush because the Range Rover is going to be pulling up to the gate. The headlights will be shining directly on him, and that's obviously going to spook Tucker, Tate and Rolf. There's no evidence whatsoever that he's hidden behind the bush because there's no footprints. There's no evidence or suggestion that he's hidden inside of a bush because there's no other damaged foliage or undergrowth in the surrounding areas. Now, if someone was laying in wait for Tucker, Tate and Rolf, in my opinion, there would be some kind of forensic clue there. There would be some footprints because, as you can see, even when these photographs are taken, a lot of the snow had already thawed. But what did remain was the snow on either side of the tracks. I believe that, as I said earlier, this was the last snow to have melted away. Therefore, anyone who was attending the scene early on should have and would have noticed any footprints that were left by someone who was laying in wait. Now, for Darren Nichols' evidence to be factual and for his version of events to be truthful, we would have, you would imagine, some footprints both entering and exiting the lane from at least two people. And this further evidence of no one actually laying in wait really goes, in my opinion, to discredit his version of events further. So not only do we have a lack of footprints, as I explained in my previous video, my theory on the hit, parts 1 and 2, we had a massive lack of footprints, and according to the distance travelled from the getaway vehicle to the Range Rover, and the two men that would have been travelling that lane, would have equated to over 1,000 steps, and simply not one of them appeared at the crime scene. So not only do we have a massive lack of footprints from Jack Wombs heading down the lane and away from the lane, but now we also have a massive lack of any evidence that anyone was ever there. There's no evidence to tell us that someone was laying in wait with two shotguns. If the best that the prosecution could come up with is a small dampened down patch of undergrowth, then really, if that was shown to me in court personally, I would find it quite laughable. As I've explained previously, there's no way that someone was sat there in the direct view of the Range Rover. So in my opinion, this extra piece of information and the looking at this piece of information further discredits Darren Nichols' version of events. So how can we explain this patch of damaged undergrowth? Well, quite simply, there was a theory that a reporter did actually gain access to the site quite early on. The police were finding it difficult to contain the crime scene, and I believe that a reporter did make his way towards the Range Rover. It was surmised that the reporter actually caused this damage to the undergrowth, or quite simply, it could have been one of the occupants of the Range Rover who got out to go to the toilet. I don't feel that there's any evidence there, especially where this damaged undergrowth is actually located, that anyone was laying in wait. I can't see that being a possibility. As the Range Rover would have travelled down there, you can see that the lights would have shined directly onto that spot. And I can't see that there's any way, any evidence or anything to suggest that someone would be so stupid as to lay basically in direct line of sight of the Range Rover coming down the lane. Now, obviously, there's a lot of trees, a lot of bushes, a lot of open fields. But as I've just said throughout this video, there's no evidence anywhere to suggest that anybody was on foot laying in wait for the Range Rover. The only footprints that we actually have are situated around the outside of the Range Rover. They don't exit or enter the lane, and they don't enter or exit from any other direction, such as fields or undergrowth. Now, if Jack Wombs did in fact bury himself in this undergrowth, then he would have been at least cut up in some way. He would have had scratches, marks, abrasions. There would have been some sort of pattern there or destruction to the undergrowth, which would have led detectives and inspectors or whoever to investigate that area a lot more thoroughly. Quite simply, there was no disturbance, and I can't believe that someone has managed to bury themselves in such thick undergrowth and come out completely unscathed and left the undergrowth as it was before he attempted to get in and out of it. Quite simply, I don't believe that that is possible. So what is my own opinion and my own conclusion after looking at all these pictures and the evidence provided? Well, quite simply, there's a lack of evidence here to support Darren Nichols' claim that there was someone waiting down the lane who was on foot. There is no disturbed undergrowth. You can see the type of bushes and foliage and undergrowth that we have in this area, and it's not the kind of undergrowth that you can simply slip in and out of without making a massive disturbance to that patch of undergrowth. There would be some kind of disturbance there, considering the size of Jack Wombs himself. There would have been some damage to that area if he was hiding in the undergrowth. There would have been a large amount of footprints and certainly a great deal of forensic evidence. And you have to believe that the investigating officers, I mean, you see them, trawling through the fields past the gate. They really would have put a lot of time and effort into searching the surrounding area and looking for some sort of clue that someone had lay in wait. And the best really they could come up with is a very flat piece of undergrowth which just happens to be in the line of sight of the Range Rover. Quite simply, I do not believe that anyone was laying in wait at that spot, as we were told in the official version of events. So where could Jack Wombs have hid? They were supposedly unaware that the gate was even locked. Well, there's no evidence, as I've said, to suggest that they were hiding anywhere down that lane. You've got to imagine that Jack Wombs was carrying 2 shotguns. This would have thrown him if Darren Nichols' version of events is to be believed. They were expecting the gate to be open, and he would have had to have found somewhere with enough cover in order to, wait for the Range Rover to arrive and then come out at the exact right angle so that he wasn't seen by Tucker, Tate or Rolfe. I mean, he wasn't aware of exactly where they were going to stop the Range Rover. So, I mean, it would have been pure guesswork on Jack Wombs' part in order to decide where he was going to wait for the Range Rover to arrive. I simply don't believe that there was anyone waiting there because there is a massive lack of evidence to suggest that there was. Now, all of this lends to my other theory, I believe, that there was a second car involved. That's why there's the lack of footprints, the lack of disturbed undergrowth, a very clean-cut execution or hit, and then they made their escape in a second vehicle. Quite simply, as I've repeated here about 50 times, there's no evidence to suggest that Jack Wombs was laying anywhere in the surrounding undergrowth. No damage to those bushes, and certainly no footprints. If you'd like to learn more about the Range Rover murders as told in court, then please click on the video in front of you now. You'll also see the Essex Boys playlist, which has an array of separate videos regarding this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.